Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, the podcast for writers who strive to be bold and readers who crave something new. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I want to thank you for being here, and I want us to stay in touch. So subscribe to this podcast, then go to writingthewrongway.com and enter your best email to receive the Martian Embassy Missive, my bi-weekly newsletter where I let you know what's happening on Mars, where we're always making big plans. Join the Martians so you don't get left out of the invasion at writingthewrongway.com. And as a special bonus, I'll send you a free book. Speaking of books, my new book is called The National Gallery, and it contains sonnets about Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, elegies lamenting the death of my iPhone, and other strange missives from yours truly, the Poet Laureate of Hell. Visit thenationalgallery.ca to order your signed copy. That's thenationalgallery.ca. This is part one of a two-part interview with MC Joudrey, also the publisher of At Bay Press. So in it, we first, in this part of the interview, we primarily discuss his novel, Phenonymous, which we didn't get into, but Matt wanted me to mention that it has been translated recently into Braille. There's a blind character in the novel who has been blind since age 7, and we see her kind of involved very significantly in the plot. And so in the kind of course of researching this, and because of a kind of temporary vision loss that Matt himself had, he decided to do a lot more research into, literary options he might have as a publisher, because he's also, of course, the publisher of the book, as At Bay Press. And he ended up putting together and putting out, in conjunction with, some other organizations, he ended up putting together a Braille version of the book. And you can read Matt's article about this at the show notes. I'll link to it. So if you go to jonathanball.com/atbay, so jonathanball.com/atbay, then you will find the show notes for this episode, where you can get a link to At Bay Press, to their, it's just atbaypress.com, but you can, link there from the show notes if you want. And also I will link to the article Matt wrote about putting together the Braille version of Phenonymous. So without further ado, we'll dive into the first of the two-part episodes. Again, this part is primarily discussing Matt as a writer and Phenonymous, although we get a little bit into publishing. And then next week, we'll have the second part of the interview, which is more focused on At Bay Press and publishing, self-publishing, not so much, but publishing as, a kind of literary activity, part of a literary community, and just in general, what is the sort of challenges and opportunities and, exciting aspects of publishing as a kind of, business operation. So without further ado, Matt Joudrey from At Bay Press.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so I'm here with Matt Joudrey, or also known as MC Joudrey, also known as At Bay Press, or Matt Bay Press, as Gregory, who just took off, was saying.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So there's a lot of things to talk to you about, Matt. But let's start. I want to talk mostly about right now about Phenonymous. So this is your recent novel. And it's coming out with your publishing company, At Bay Press, and I just want to say before we kind of get into it, this is a really beautifully designed book.
Oh, thanks.
You've got really interesting. I mean, it's hardcover, it's cloth, beautifully bound. It's got a map of Winnipeg in it. I love this map of Winnipeg at the start too, because it's very much like it reminds me of the maps at the start of fantasy novels in some ways. But it is just, a map of Winnipeg, although you've got a few fictional places like the ABC, Associated with Canadian Banks.
Yeah.
And so on. You've got my copy has a limited edition aspect where there's a little hologram and all sorts of neat touches. It's got a beautiful, what's this called, embossing?
Foil stamp
on in the hardcover. It's really gorgeously done. So I'll talk a little bit about, I want to talk more about that kind of thing when we talk about your press, but
sure.
As a writer, I just want to ask, what do you feel is why do you feel this stuff is so important as a writer before you get into
design?
Yeah, the design.
The design, the aesthetics, the tactile aspect are I mean, they're an innate human experience, I find, and maybe that's just a personal thing. I mean, maybe that's me wanting to do what I like, but I think that's why in Canada, at least in North America, I mean, ebook sales still continue to be a mere fraction of physical book sales, and I think that's a testament to people wanting to hold a book. I think that they want to. I think that they want that physical object in their hand. So then it's my job to, if I'm working on it from a design perspective, to make sure that I'm putting out an object that's going to be evocative of that of those important aspects.
It's interesting to me too because I just remember. People always talk about younger generations and ebooks. I remember when the ebooks were really kind of, making their rise. That was a lot of the culture conversation was, kids will be reading ebooks. But what I found is that kids hate ebooks. I know my daughter and her friends and like that generation and below, they're really uncomfortable with ebooks. They don't like them. They don't want to read as a group. They don't want to read a book on their phones. They want to have like a physical thing. And it's interesting. I remember once my daughter kind of picking her up from school, and she had this e-reader with her, and she was angrily like throwing this e-reader like on the dash, and I was like, what are you doing with this e-reader? She's like, oh, my friend she's got the next book in the series that I want to read, but she says she lent it to me, but then she only has ebooks, so she had like her friend's e-reader. She was just so mad that she had to read a book. Yeah, it's not the same, and but it was interesting because I find like I prefer print books, but I'm more comfortable with ebooks than like my millennial daughter, or whatever. I think she's a millennial. I forget the numbers, but it's like she's born in 2000, so I think that counts.
It does, yeah. I think she's right in there, yeah.
But so as a writer though, like just kind of so I think to me, and a lot of the attachment to the print book is like those days of deciding to become a writer. Like I was dreamed of writing a print book. You know what I mean? Like It never was in my head. Maybe it's different for people growing up now. It was a lot of the attraction in certain respects was like a fetishization of the object, and like one's kind of identity kind of being connected to these objects in certain ways.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also think too, though, that I mean, when you sit down to write a book, you make a personal decision that you're going to give up an aspect of your life, right? You're like, okay, I've got, like you said, you have a daughter, you probably have a partner, and now you've made a decision that you're going to spend a great deal of time away from them to sit down and work on this alone, right? And be alone. And a lot of writers also have to work a regular, we'll call it a day job or a night job or whatever, right? And so for them now they're double dipping, and their time is their 24-hour stretch has been chewed up almost completely, right? So I think that's the first step, is that you sit down and you say to yourself, okay, I'm gonna spend all this time on this book.
So what was the impetus for you that, like, when did you first kind of decide, or what kind of, do you remember what compelled you to really get interested in writing?
Well, I was a reader. That's for sure the biggest interest is that I think it was an organic evolution for me. I read a lot, and then suddenly I was writing and drawing a lot, and that was at a very young age. Before I even understood what that was, like it was just an organic thing, an extension of the person that I was. So I just sat down and did that sort of thing.
And do you remember when you started to really think seriously about publishing, or like, of course you became a publisher, but even just before that,
right?
Do you remember when that started to enter into your mind as part of the process?
Yeah, well, I think it was at two points in my life. I think I was in my early teens, and I decided, I really want to make this comic book, and I had this story that I'd written, then I had to sit down and illustrate it. And the illustrating was really the hardest part for me. Was okay, it's going to take more time than it did for me to write it. And then after I was done, I had like, I don't know, 15 pages or something like that. And I thought, oh, this is so great. And then I photocopied it, you know, like at school or whatever. And that was sort of my first real experience with like disseminating my work in some way, which would have been just to like a couple of friends and, you know, maybe my folks or something like that. And then I started going to Comic Cons and, you know, other book-related festivals and conventions, and I would see all this great talent. And I would hear all these stories about trying to get published and it not happening. And a lot of people were getting these you know, great rejection letters. When I say great rejection letters, it was like rejection letters with, we're just so sorry we can't publish you because our list is made up for the next 3 years. And that's so discouraging because it was like, your work is great, but we have no room for you. And, you know, it's different than just getting a form letter, right? Like everybody's got form letters in their filing cabinet at home that just say, "Dear author, thanks for submitting your work. Fortunately, it's not for us. Signed off, the editors," right? But these people are getting like, you know, just legitimate rejections that we just don't have the space for you. And I thought, well, somebody's got to make space for them because I really like their work. And then I think coming back to that, like creating, which is in the writer in you, is that, well, I know personally what that's like to want to create something and to see it live and go out there into the world and grow up and become something, right? So why not offer the opportunity to these people? And I would say like 85-90% of what we publish is people that I've met and seen their work physically at various different events. And you know, I'm able to really like just sit back and watch and see how they do their thing.
It's interesting when you talk about these, like, you know, those very positive rejection letters, because my first book collected for 3 years. I collected those letters, and every single one of them, without exception, was one of those letters.
Yeah.
I remember one of them. I remember after a few years of this, I got one from a press in the States that said, "We're sorry, but, you know, we are in the business of publishing only books that we feel like no one else would ever publish, and, you know, that's the kind of, but it's, you know, strange and unique and weird work. And while we, like, you know, really value this work, we think somebody else would publish it."
And that's why you got rejected.
I remember I got rejected because they thought somebody else might publish it. And I remember thinking, like, nobody else wants to publish this book. They actually even just sent me a list of like other publishers I could send it to, which I'd already sent it to and got rejected from.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, eventually that book did get published, so they were right in a sense. But like, what it really took for me, weirdly, like for that book, because it was such a strange book, was actually one of the publishing companies that had only done chapbooks started doing trade books. Like, I literally, like, a whole publishing company's way that they operated had to change.
Yeah.
and I had waited it out because I'd been getting rejected from these other people, you know. It was very strange. But, you know, but anyway, I guess the question, just to kind of come back to, like, one of the things I think that kind of makes or breaks people often in those, like, earlier days where, you know, before they kind of, you know, start to get published is, like, how they weather those rejections, but also just how serious they are.
Yeah.
And so, like, I always am interested, like, what keeps somebody going, like, especially when you have a big project. So, like, just to kind of fast forward a little bit. So we're, you know, Fanonymous, you know, it's not your first book as a writer.
It's not,
But where did this book kind of begin for you?
I think it began with those first few pages there, with all the letters and numbers on it. Those are all of the various numbers, or, you know, that have been applied to me throughout my lifetime, whether it be you know, a student number, an employee number, social insurance number,
really? These are all
telephone number, every and they're just in repetition, so it would be impossible to determine what's what. But I mean, I just went through all my filing and just said, okay, And I was like, oh my God, they're like, it's like an endless amount of numbers that have been applied to me. You know what I mean? Over the years. And suddenly my identity just sort of like came into question. Like, who am I? What am I? In the eyes of those that I sort of report to, whether it be the government or a school or a job or whatever. And I just thought, nobody sees me as an actual person. And then the idea of anonymity, actually, instead of it being, it was for me, it was like sort of like the last aspect, the last gong of freedom was. It was in that anonymity of like nobody really knowing who you are, as opposed to like today's day and age where it was like everything gets shared, and that's where the sort of the fame and anonymity of the title came into play, which was the idea of being famous versus anonymous, or the idea of being anonymous and famous. Right, so somebody like a Banksy,
like the graffiti artist.
Yeah, all right, exactly. So the graffiti artists that you see their work on the wall, but you have no idea who they are, right? And some of that stuff, like having grown up in that environment, where having been a graffiti artist myself, I just thought, this is great. Like, and the idea too of like the marrying of like art and words in such a way that it became guerrilla street art. Where like a lot of graffiti art is just somebody choosing a name that allows them to be anonymous, and then they spray that name on the wall in some sort of like art form. But I like the idea of going deeper than that and having like real messages being sent out and talked about, and that exacting some sort of like change starting at the street level.
So can you talk a little bit about just what the basic premise or plot of the book?
Yeah, so what you're looking at is there's a lot of layers.
There's a lot of things.
There's a lot of layers in this book.
So first off, maybe just to start with, like, it's set in a kind of unreal Winnipeg.
Yes.
So maybe let's just start with like there's some really great things about this Winnipeg of yours, because the book is very interesting in so far as it's like, on one hand, it's kind of a sci-fi. With sort of thriller aspects. It also has these like magic realist kind of fantasy moments. So like Winnipeg has been is a strange low place where there's almost no operational vehicles.
Yeah.
Because they've all been kind of killed by a hacker code.
Yeah.
Or by a hack.
Yeah.
You've got a pomegranate tree growing at the center of Portage in Maine, magically surviving the winter and so on.
Oddly enough, I received emails from people who had reviewed the book or read the book and just got in touch and said, "Is that like who'd never been to Winnipeg? Is that actually a thing? Like, is that
the pomegranate?"
Yeah, and I think that's the most interesting aspect of Winnipeg is that all of this really feels like it could happen.
It's a strange city.
It's a strange city. And I think that people who are transplants like myself, who weren't born here, who come to this city and then, manage to somehow make it their home.
Well, that was my next question, which is sort of before we kind of get more into the book. Like, one of the things that happens in this book, you've got this Jack character coming to the city, who's this graffiti artist, who's again kind of hiding from the world more or less, in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. You've got ways that his life is intersecting with this sort of corporate and espionage or intrigue that's taking place. In this Winnipeg where it's in a Canada where there is no hard currency. Like, hard currency has been eliminated.
It's gone.
It's all kind of digital currency. You've got, again, this kind of seemingly magical pomegranate tree growing in the center of Portage, Maine.
That's right.
It's pomegranate season, everyone's eating pomegranate seeds everywhere. You've got the IKEA in Winnipeg, which in your version is infested with feral children that people have just left there, but the government has refused, doesn't really have a system, so they're just kind of roaming in feral packs around the IKEA.
That's right.
You've got a zombie. There's just this guy who's like a local fixture, but he's like, it turns out he's a zombie.
That's it.
You know, he doesn't even really figure into the plot in any
No, he's just there.
way.
But that's it for me. Like that's Winnipeg to a T. It would just there would be a zombie here, just hanging out. Yeah, and like everybody would just be cool with it. Like that's how I see the city, and I just see like people would be like, oh, that's just.
It's interesting to me because I'm right now I'm writing a novel that is set in kind of as unreal Winnipeg, and so it's very. I'm always interested in like people's bizarre, crazy visions of Winnipeg, but it also kind of comes to the question that like everyone's always asking Jack in the novel, which is like, why Winnipeg? Or why did you move?
That's right.
Here? So for you, like, where did you grow up, and why did you come to Winnipeg then?
I can't really say I grew up any one place in particular because we moved around a lot. Before Winnipeg, I came from Toronto, but I'm a Nova Scotia native. I was born there. I was born in Sydney, Cape Breton, and slowly moved west, and that just had to do with my father and his work. And I don't know. I think that there's one really great story of like living in Toronto, taking the subway and the TTC, the Toronto Transit System. They would, or I guess Toronto Transit Commission, I should say. They would hold an annual book sale every year at my station, which was Davisville Station, which was sort of like their head office. And you come off the subway and there'd be all these tables, and it was all the TTC workers that donated books to help make money for charity. And there was this book on literature, and it was all the literary terms, I guess, at the time. The book was published in the late 60s, but this is great. And I asked the lady how much it was, and she said, oh, it's just $1. Every book's $1. And so I went to my wallet, and I didn't have $1. And I'm like, okay, I got to go to the bank machine. And she's like, it's right there. And I went over to the bank machine, and to take out $20, I had to pay $3 in service fees to get my $20 bill to pay for a $1 book. That was it for me. Like that was the nexus of the crisis, I guess, is that like I just saw this and wanted to begin to write about that. And then and I'd worked downtown at First Canadian Place, and they have these elevators there that will literally eat you alive. The doors are so powerful and so quick to close and so aggressive that I've seen so many people try to get on at the last second and just get like mashed by these doors. And that again was just this unbelievable aspect of working in the corporate world where even the elevators will eat you alive. So there was just a lot of that I guess was pent up, built up, and then I just spewed it out in this poor novel.
And then why is it that you came to Winnipeg in the first place then? Like from Toronto?
Yeah, that's the question, right? That's why Winnipeg.
The Winnipeg, they're always asking Jack.
Everybody
asks.
Yeah, and you know what's funny now, having been here like I guess it's 10 years now. I ask people now when I hear that they're like, because I'm curious, like what would ever bring you to this city? You know what I mean? Like you live here long enough, or you're born here. You like, I had to be here. Why are you here? And
I like Winnipeg, but it's a confusing thing because there's not necessarily like a industry that brings people here, or like there's just not a lot of like obvious reasons why somebody would settle in Winnipeg.
Right.
Even though I think it's a good place to live and everything, like what is the reason that you ended up moving here? Like I didn't grow up in Winnipeg.
Well, I moved here because of the publishing company. Like we had started the press in a small little apartment in Toronto on the 28th floor of this tower, and we'd run out of space, and the printer that we were using. We wanted to start with a new printer, and Friesens had at the time had a lot of really great things that they were doing that not a lot of the other printers were doing. Plus, they had you get what you pay for. So I've had experiences with Friesens where because they're not perfect and they've screwed things up, and then they've taken ownership for it and done what they needed to do to fix it. And I've had experiences with other printers where they don't do that, right? So that's amazing. And then also, too, Friesens has been a really good partner in helping us ship books in consolidated shipments and keeping costs down. And so also our American distributor at the time was in Chicago. So getting books down there, it just made more sense to be Central Canada. And then I'd say the last big thing is that I really felt that there was this, I don't want to say undiscovered, because I think everybody in Manitoba knew it. I just really felt there was a lot of talent here, a lot of great talent to sink my teeth into with the publishing company. And I can honestly say that I've proved myself right. There is a lot of great talent here, and I've published a lot of great Manitoban talent, right? So that makes it worth it just in that alone.
And then just coming back to the book here, so you've got this plot that revolves around the the central banking system,
right?
Who's eliminated this. They've eliminated hard currency, more or less, consolidated control of these like digital paper trails. You've got an interesting kind of, I mean, there's no date in the book, but it's certainly a sort of near future
that was on
world
purpose.
Where, people, cell phone access is free. Everyone's got a free cell phone, but they're forced to watch advertisements.
That's right.
Every once in a while they have to watch a 60-minute ad. There's all sorts of really neat kind of dystopian elements that are very funny in some respects, and in other ways, just sort of colorful and adding to the weird world. And then in other respects, become almost techno thriller,
right?
Plot, aspects. So, and one of the things that's curious. So one, I'm just kind of interested in you blending all those different elements.
Yeah. So I just felt like I start with characters, and then the story bleeds out from there. Don't get me wrong. I take all these other fragments of observation that I accumulate throughout life, and then throw it in there as well. I've noticed that homeless people get less money now because people just don't have money on them. Right? They only carry plastic. So when a homeless person wants something to eat, and you don't have any money to give them, I don't know. It's kind of heartbreaking for me, right? And so there was a time where people, they just had that little coffee cup, and you threw a little change in it, right? And it didn't matter where it was going. People always said, it's just going to go to booze. Well, whatever. You know what I mean? Like they're out there on -40, living on the street. Like, at least you can do is toss them a little change. That's always been my perspective on it. But I think that was an aspect of it. So that helped me write what would happen to the world if we lost hard currency. And if we lost hard currency, all of these small businesses would crumble, which wouldn't break the heart of the corporate world at all, right? Because a lot of them operate on cash, and let's face it, not all of them declare what they make, right? And that's how these businesses survive. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think the government would see that as well, because they know that most people don't declare all their income. If every Canadian got audited, I guarantee you that the numbers wouldn't work out.
Well, you've got an interesting moment in the book where people have in the kind of backstory what has happened is people have had a chance to just declare all their money at once.
Yeah,
because otherwise it will just cease to exist.
That's it. You've been painted into a corner, and you have the opportunity now to come clean, pay your taxes on it, or that money is money is nothing more than just.
But now, to access your money, there's a fee, as you say, that bank fee to get your money out of the machine now has become just any transaction.
Yep.
There's a corporate tax almost on top of it, in addition to these other taxes.
Well, that was just it. I mean, banks used to be they used to be a place that you would keep your money to keep it safe, right? To keep it from theft in your house, but that's not the case anymore. In fact, your house is probably just as safe as a bank, but people have been conditioned to believe that and not only that, I mean, if you work a day job, nobody's going to pay you in cash or check. They're all going to do direct deposit. So everything has pushed to a direction where the banks are allowed to control your very livelihood. And so I thought, what's the final step? Well, there's two. Number one is the end of hard currency. And then number two is the loss of control from the Bank of Canada, where the Minister of Finance and Bank of Canada give up control to an independent third party who now runs the show. And I just thought, well, and of course all of these banks, they conglomerate together to make an association led by one person. There's nothing more fascist or dystopian than that.
So why was it important for you to get all the kind of, more fantastical or, even humorous sides of the story in? Like
right.
The pomegranate tree, for example, doesn't have anything to do with
you need that.
any of that.
Life is full of, like, even at its worst moments, there's still really funny bits of life. And so it wouldn't the story wouldn't ring true if there wasn't humor in it too.
What I'm interested in I like I'm really interested in work like this where you have very clearly a story in a genre,
right?
But the author is not really going in that along the conventions of the genre precisely,
right.
And is bleeding in all these different aspects from other types of writing.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. The other thing that's just personally the thing I'm most interested in general in literature is unusual narrative voices, which this book has in spades because it's narrated by this kind of figure who's sort of disconnected from all things. Like, can you describe like the narrative voice a little bit?
Yeah, well, the typical, I think, classical narrative voice is one where you realize that somebody's just telling you a story. You don't know who that is. It doesn't matter. In this case, though, the narrator, it almost seems like they're there, or were there the entire time. So they've experienced it firsthand, and they're willing to even break the third wall. Which one reviewer said? I'm trying to remember what she said. She said something like, "Yeah, the writer does a really strange thing here, and often breaks the third wall." And she went on to say that the first time it happens, from memory, it was just like kind of like a really strange thing, but then it works. And that's the point. Is that I wanted the narrator to feel like it could have been somebody that you had brushed past in Winnipeg, that they were just in.
Yes, it's an interesting tone because it's a very casual tone in many respects. It's like, this is a story about the end of hard currency. And it's like, come along. We'll get to that thing later. Sometimes what happens is, pomegranates have these little seeds. It's interesting because you have all these little digressive moments where the narrator will just explain something about the world or what's happening, or just, as you say, like offer an opinion.
Yeah, and he forgets things.
I brought you a London fog, and and like there's a moment in the book where it's talking like a London fog is like made this way. I was
wondering if you were going to pick up on that, and you did.
Well, I didn't realize Parler had London fogs.
That's so fantastic. I mean, that was the whole point. But
no, I was. But there's a whole little moment in the book where the character has a London fog, and it's actually a plot point.
Yeah.
And then there's a little narrative discussion of the London fog and how what goes in it and how it tastes. Yeah. They're really good. Yeah. But this is a narrator who's not otherwise But yeah, it's a very intrusive, as you say, kind of breaking the fourth wall, version of.
Yeah, sorry, I said voice. Third wall, didn't I?
Yeah, well, whatever. But that intrusive, it's they're just coming at the reader, telling them things directly. Talking about what's going to happen later. If you just hang on, be patient.
Yeah.
Good on you. At one point, there's it makes some. There's a comment about literacy, and it's good on you for breaking the statistic and reading a book.
Yeah, having fun.
But how'd you settle into that voice? Because I find one of the hardest things personally as a writer is finding the right voice for a book, and then also I'm just interested in unusual narrative voices.
Yeah,
because you don't see them very often, especially in work that would otherwise. I find it especially unusual in genre fiction.
Yeah, you're right about that. I do too, because I read a lot of genre fiction, and I read a lot of literary fiction, graphic. I read it all. I have a taste for all of it, poetry, and I glean little bits from all of that too, because it's all various different writing styles, different motifs, different. I mean, just the facets are infinite. So for me, I thought, well, I have to do a voice that I'm comfortable with. So I have a feeling that a lot of that has just to do with myself, and how I operate in the everyday world. And that voice is birthed or spawned from that aspect of whatever it is that I read and whatever it is that I do based on the person that I am, and then I have fun with it. And sometimes I went too far, and then my editor would bring it back a little bit and say, you did go a little too far. You just went right over the edge on this. I don't know if anybody's going to get that. And so there is a bit of a taming of the writer that you have to do, where you just kind of, reel them in a bit. And I think that has to, you have to be able to, as a writer, to be able to say, okay, I trust my editor. And that they're going to make this hopefully a good book into a great book, and you follow their direction. And sometimes it's like, the editor will come back to you and say, that's not enough. Like, I think you could do so much more here with this. Elaborate on it, and then you do, and that's where that narrative voice comes out even more. But the narrator in the book is unreliable, mm-hmm. And I think that's obvious, because it's really from that, we'll call it, a narrator's perspective, right? Like there's no argument here. There's nobody to come and say to the narrator, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not true. And he even says a number of times in the book, that's really true. And that's the marketing aspect of it that I wanted to hit home, which was, there's a lot of attack against advertising and marketing and the onslaught and barrage of that in our daily world. And I wanted the narrator to even play with that and mess around with that, where he says, Jonathan Ball is an ex-convict. That's really true, right? We know it's not.
I think of you got a lot of historical moments in Winnipeg, and every time you say it, "This really true," I feel like there's the line. There's one moment where describing when the Winnipeg, retired as electric streetcars and paraded one through the streets with a sad face painted on it, and so on, and kind of state oh, that's really true. Every time that comes up, I keep thinking, is it really true? It seems like it could, but It's bizarre and seems clearly untrue. But then, because it's Winnipeg, it almost feels like it could be true. Well, but If Day, do you know what If Day?
Yes.
So If Day, tell people what If Day was. And this is the kind of thing that we used to do in Winnipeg. It's
right.
Like Winnipeg as a city.
Well, okay, so just
Guy Madden has in My Winnipeg. If you're listening, go watch My Winnipeg. Where similarly, you got this weird blend of truth and lie about Winnipeg,
right?
But he gets into detail. But If Day was an actual event that took place in Winnipeg.
Yes, and oddly enough, another reviewer likened the book to
My Winnipeg.
Yeah, a surreal My Winnipeg, which I thought was completely unintentional on my behalf. But I never even thought of that until this person said it, and I thought, just thinking back to the film and the horse heads, Frozen, nothing is uninfluenced. I'm influenced by everything. So there must have been something that maybe triggered, in the deep recesses and the synapses fire, and something happens, right? Where I say to myself, well, I'm going to release some bison in Winnipeg and see how that goes.
Yeah, bison. There's a stampede of bison that just keeps appearing. And
just roaming, and nobody can seem
around
to catch them, and
nobody can find or catch a
and
herd of bison. But there's a real herd of bison that's corralled over at Fort White, which So there's this weird seed of truth in a lot of the stuff.
That's the best part of good fiction is having an element of truth, which, like those trolleys, that's a story that was handed down to me from somebody who was from here, who was old enough, I guess, to have had that handed down to them, and apparently it happened. But I wasn't there, so I can't say. But that's the beauty of half truth is stories become purple monkey dishwashers, sort of at the end of time, right? Which it's handed down to one person and it changes, and then it's morphed and it evolves and handed down to another person, it changes, and then it becomes a legend. Winnipeg is filled with legends.
Well, maybe before we kind of move into talking about the press,
sure,
kind of end off talking about the book. Can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of I feel like in many ways this is a book that is interested in that kind of legend making or myth making, mythologizing Winnipeg.
Yes.
There's an interesting mythologizing Winnipeg project that a lot of Winnipeg based artists have taken up.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know to you what is what is so important about taking a place where you live and mythologizing it in a manner.
Well,
is it something you've been thinking through writing a book like this, or is it just something that just
I think it just happened
while you're trying to have fun?
For me anyway, it just happened. I just found that Winnipeg was this very curious, surreal, interesting place that it was worth it to commission the cartographer over at U of W, Weldon Hebert, to do this map. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I'm like, it's a bit of a project, Weldon, because it's about 90% true, and then there's about 10% fiction to the map, which he was fine with, and he produced this great map, where it just, all of that is just part of the layers of the book, which is that, there is definitely some real truth to it. There's definitely some real possible truth to it, but there's a lot of lie, and there's a lot of falsehood, misleading information. But that's the world we live in, right? What when you go on Twitter or you go on Facebook or you go on the internet or the news tells you a story, there's somebody always has an invested interest in it, right? They're always after something. It's like the politician. It's like they're supposed to be a public servant, but they're in it to make a wage, and they've got their own best interests at heart. And we've seen that, historically. So what does the everyday average citizen have to do to survive? And I like the aspect of one person still being able to make a difference, even if that's not true. And a real part of me believes that that's not true, that one person cannot make a difference in the world. But that's the beauty of writing a book like that, is that you offer up that seed of hope.